All right, welcome everyone to another Deep Dive, and today we're tackling something that I think resonates with a lot of WoW players out there. Hitting that 2400 rating in Arena, it's the dream, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You know?
It's that kind of benchmark that shows you've really mastered your class in the arena.
And we're going to be looking at a specific comp today that has been, it's been making some waves, in the War Within at least. Beast Mastery Hunter and Lightsmith Holy Paladin. You guys sent us some awesome analysis, some really in-depth looks at this comp. And
Right.
Our goal today is to try to break down not only the strategies that top players are using with this comp, but even some training techniques, believe it or not. So are you ready to get into that gladiator mindset?
I am absolutely ready, yeah. Let's dive in.
Awesome. So this comp is interesting because it's not all about just raw burst damage, right? Like some of the other popular setups out there. It seems like there's a lot more nuance to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, it really is more of a balance, I think. You know, you've got to have that consistent pressure, of course, but you also need, the smart defensive play and knowing when to kind of turn the tables on your opponent.
So it's a bit more of a chess match.
Yeah.
Than just a straight up slugfest, maybe.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of strategy involved for sure.
Okay. So for players out there who really want to hit that 2400 rating, right? We're talking about the top, like 0.5%, 1% of players. Where do we even begin to break down the strengths of this comp? Well,
let's start with the Beast Mastery Hunter. I think one of the things that makes them so effective in this comp is just their consistent damage output. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of their damage comes from their pet and their instant shots. They can stay mobile, they can kite effectively. We're not talking about huge burst windows here, but more of a constant wearing down of the enemy's resources, especially as dampening starts to kick in.
Yes, dampening. The double-edged sword of Arena. Every Arena player's,
Frenemy?
Yeah, frenemy, for sure. So we've got this Hunter laying down that consistent pressure, right?
Yeah.
But to get to 2400, you also got to be able to survive. The enemy team's going to try to shut you down. So that's where the Lightsmith Holy Paladin comes in.
Yeah, exactly. The Lightsmith, what's really cool about them is they can contribute some serious damage while still providing, really solid healing and support, like their Sacred Weapon ability, for example. Not only does it buff their allies' damage, but it converts some of that damage into holy damage for the Paladin.
So you've got this healer who can suddenly pump out some extra damage.
Yeah. It's a nice little surprise for the enemy team.
And it's a far cry from, the old days of Paladins just kind of standing back and spamming heals, right?
Oh, yeah, they're much more dynamic now.
Okay, so before we get into the real nitty-gritty of how to play this comp, let's talk about talents. What are some of the key talent choices that separate those average players from the ones who are consistently hitting 2400?
Yeah, good question. So for the Hunter, you absolutely have to go with the Dark Ranger path. The talent that really stands out there is Barb Shot resetting kill command on crits. Combine that with Killer Instinct for a strong opener, and Bacta Orhan, you can put out some serious pressure right out of the gate.
So right away you're putting the enemy team on the back foot, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. And on the Paladin side, it's all about Blessing of Sanctuary, Divine Favor, and Ultimate Sacrifice.
And Ultimate Sacrifice that's the one that removes stuns.
Yeah, and that is invaluable at this rating. Being able to remove stuns from your teammate, it can win games.
Clutch, for sure.
And then Divine Favor, of course, that can help you recover from burst damage that might otherwise just wipe you out.
It's like a get out of jail free card almost.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a lifesaver.
Okay, so we've got our talent builds locked in. But we all know gear plays a huge role in Arena, especially those higher ratings. So what are some of the must-have gear pieces for both the Hunter and the Paladin?
Well, gearing up for this comp, it's all about maximizing those strengths. So for the Hunter, the 4-piece tier set bonus is essential. Getting that chance for increased pet damage on every attack just amplifies your pressure even more.
I mean, it's already consistent damage, and then you're just adding to it.
Exactly. And of course, you can't forget the Gladiator's Medallion and Insignia of Alacrity. Those trinkets are pretty standard for a reason, especially when you need to break CC or get a quick boost to your stats.
Yeah, they're like the bread and butter of Arena PvP.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it sounds like gearing for the Paladin is kind of following that same philosophy, right? Just bolstering their ability to heal and and contribute to the damage.
Yeah, definitely. So for the Paladin, the 4-piece tier set bonus is crucial as well. It boosts the healing of Holy Shock and Word of Glory, which are your main heals, and that extra healing boost when you're near your target, it plays perfectly into the Lightsmith's playstyle of, staying close to the action.
So it's all about synergy. Even with the gear, it's all about how these two classes work together.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, the stat priority for the Paladin is interesting.
It is. So after versatility, of course, for durability, mastery reigns supreme. You really want to maximize that healing output, especially since a lot of your healing is instant casts.
So you can weave it in between, those damage spells.
Exactly, yeah. You're always doing something, whether it's healing or contributing to damage.
Awesome. So we've covered the foundation, right? Talents and gear. Now let's talk about actually winning games with this comp. What are the primary strategies that top players use to secure victory?
Well, there's 2 main paths to victory with this comp: attrition warfare and burst setups.
Okay, attrition warfare. So that sounds like a long game.
Right? It is. It relies on your ability to outlast your opponents. So the hunter is maintaining that consistent pressure, forcing them to use their cooldowns, while the paladin keeps everyone topped off and uses their defensive cooldowns strategically.
So it's kind of a dance, right? Knowing when to use those defensives. To mitigate the enemy's burst.
Exactly. And then as the fight goes on, dampening becomes a huge factor. So as long as you can survive those initial burst windows, the scales start to tip in your favor.
It's a war of attrition, right? You just wear the enemy team down
until they just can't keep up anymore.
Okay, now you also mentioned burst setups. So this comp isn't all about just slow, drawn-out fights.
No, definitely not. There are times when you gotta go for the quick kill, and that's where the burst setup comes in.
And what does that look like?
Well, think of the classic Ho-J trap combo. The paladin charges in, lands a hammer of justice on the enemy healer, and the hunter instantly follows up with a freezing trap.
So you're locking down the enemy healer.
Yeah, even for a few seconds, it can be devastating at this level.
Especially when the hunter has bestial wrath and bloodshed ready to go.
Exactly. And with the paladin amplifying that damage with sacred weapon, you can often just delete a DPS before their healer can even react.
Man, that sounds incredibly satisfying. But I imagine pulling off those combos, consistently takes a lot of practice and coordination.
Oh yeah, definitely. It takes time to really master those setups.
So what are some common pitfalls that players fall into, especially when they're trying to reach that 2400 mark?
I'd say one of the biggest mistakes is overlapping major defensives. It might seem tempting to pop everything at once when you're under pressure, but you need to coordinate with your partner and stagger those cooldowns.
Otherwise, you're left vulnerable later in the fight.
Exactly. You don't want to be caught with your pants down when the enemy unleashes their next burst.
Right. Any other mistakes that you see players making?
Sloppy CC chains are another big one. Like landing a trap when the enemy isn't stunned, or stunning a target that's already trapped. It just wastes those precious seconds, and it triggers diminishing returns.
So it's not just about knowing your own abilities. It's about understanding how they interact with your partners and the enemies, right?
Yeah, it's all about that coordination and timing.
Okay. Now, we can't forget about the hunter's other half, the pet.
Oh, yeah. The pet is crucial in this comp.
What are some mistakes that players make when it comes to pet management?
Oh, pet mismanagement can be a game changer. Literally, you see players letting their pets get caught in AoE damage, not healing them proactively, or even forgetting about the backup pet. And, that pet is a huge chunk of the hunter's damage. If it goes down, you're in trouble.
It's almost like you have to manage 2 characters at once, right?
In a way, yeah. You gotta be aware of your pet's positioning and health at all times.
Okay, so speaking of positioning, I imagine that plays a huge role in this comp's success as well, right? Especially with the hunter's ability to kite and the paladin needing to stay relatively close to their partner.
Absolutely. Bad positioning can lead to disaster very quickly. Hunters chasing targets out of range of their healer, paladins getting caught out of position and becoming easy targets. Those are mistakes you can't afford to make at 2400 rating.
So it's all about using the environment to your advantage.
Yeah, playing around pillars, maintaining effective range from melee, always being aware of your line of sight.
So it's a constant dance, almost, right? Adjusting your position based on the situation and the enemy's movements.
Exactly. You got to be adaptable and react to what's happening around you.
Okay, so we talked about, using those defensive cooldowns to mitigate burst. But what about those moments when you need to, create some space or reset the fight? or prevent the enemy from healing. How does this handle those scenarios?
Well, this is where their understanding of map awareness and positioning really comes in. A skilled BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin duo, they know how to use pillars and line of sight to control the flow of the fight.
So they're not just reacting to the enemy, they're dictating the pace.
Exactly. They can force enemies to overextend, deny them drinking opportunities, and just generally make it very difficult for the enemy to land their own CC or burst.
So they're making the enemy play on their terms, essentially.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, so let's get even more specific. When you're facing certain comps, does the overall strategy change? Like, for example, Rogue Mage, right? That classic double DPS comp. That's a nightmare for a lot of teams. How does BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin handle their burst damage?
Well, survival is definitely key in that matchup. You need to weather that initial storm and then exploit their lack of a dedicated healer. So having a coordinated defensive plan is really critical. Pre-planning trinket usage, the Paladin using Blessing of Sacrifice proactively, and the Hunter combining Roar of Sacrifice with Aspect of the Turtle. Those can all be game changers.
So it's like a high-stakes stance, right? Mitigating that initial burst.
Exactly, yeah. You gotta be on your toes.
And then turning the fight around in your favor.
Yeah, once that burst is down, they become a lot more vulnerable.
Okay, so what about when you're facing, like, a more sustained pressure comp? Like Warrior Healer, for example.
Yeah. Warrior Healer, that's a different beast altogether.
That seems like it'd be a much longer, more drawn-out fight.
It can be, yeah. Patience is definitely key against Warrior Healer.
So what's the strategy there?
Well, you're likely looking at a longer match, one where efficiently managing cooldowns and strategically applying pressure will win the day. The Hunter's kiting ability becomes super important there, forcing the Warrior to use cooldowns to close the gap, while the Paladin focuses on keeping everyone healthy and looking for opportunities to pressure the healer.
So it becomes, again, another battle of attrition, kind of.
In a way, yeah. You're trying to force them to expend resources while you stay just out of reach.
It's fascinating how this comp can kind of shift strategies so effectively.
It is, yeah. It's very adaptable.
Now, what about those mirror matches? Facing another BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin.
Oh, those are always intense.
I bet. That must be like a mental game as much as a skill test.
It really is. It often comes down to who makes the fewest mistakes, who can land their CC chains more precisely, and who can exploit those tiny windows of opportunity.
It's all about the little things, those subtle edges.
Exactly. Like utilizing a cunning pet with Master's Call to break roots. Things like that can be the difference between victory and defeat.
It's a battle of the minds, then.
Pretty much, yeah. You're trying to predict your opponent's moves and react just a hair faster.
Before we move on to some of the more advanced stuff, any quick tips for handling other common comps, like Retribution Paladin Healer or Death Knight Healer?
Sure. Against Retribution Paladin, respecting their burst window during Avenging Wrath is critical. Be ready to kite, use defenses, and wait it out. Once that's over, they become much more manageable.
So it's all about surviving that initial onslaught.
Yeah, pretty much. And Death Knight matchups are all about pet protection. Cleanse becomes essential for removing slows on the Hunter, and understanding the Death Knight's burst cooldowns will help you dictate the flow of the fight.
It's incredible how this comp seems to have an answer for almost every challenge.
Yeah, it's a very well-rounded comp.
But let's be honest, reaching 2400 requires more than just the basics, right? What are some of those advanced techniques that really separate the good players from the truly great?
Now we're getting into the fun stuff. It's all about mastering the nuances. For example, using Blessing of Sacrifice preemptively to break crowd control, like Polymorph. That can be a game changer.
Really? So using a defensive cooldown offensively?
Exactly, turning damage into a CC break.
That's incredible. What other tricks do these top players have up their sleeves?
Well, focus macros are another must-have. You know, interrupting enemy heals, trapping focus targets, controlling your pet, all while maintaining focus on your main target. It requires a level of precision that focus macros can really provide.
So it's almost like playing the game on a different level, right?
It is, yeah. It's about maximizing your efficiency and your control over your character.
And then there's the communication aspect, right? You got to be on the same page with your partner.
Oh, absolutely. Communication is key at this level. Top-rated teams, they develop a shorthand, almost like a secret language, using keywords and phrases to relay critical information quickly and efficiently.
So it's like they're playing as one unit, almost like a well-oiled machine.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. They're completely in sync.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the technical side of things, but what about the mental game? How important is that when you're pushing for 2400?
It's huge. I mean, the mental game is crucial at that level. We see top players who rarely, if ever, die with major cooldowns unused. Their decision-making under pressure is exceptional.
So it's staying calm, focused.
Exactly. And they don't tilt after a loss. They analyze, they adapt, and they move on.
So it's not just about skill, it's about mindset as well.
Absolutely. You got to have the right mentality to succeed at that level.
Okay, so we've got some research here that's really interesting. It's about pro athletes and how their training techniques can actually be applied to WoW. This is where things get really interesting. You ready to dive into that a little bit?
I'm all ears. Let's hear it.
Okay, so how do these pro athletes train their minds and bodies in a way that can translate to better WoW performance?
Well, let's start with mental preparation. We see top athletes using pre-game routines, visualization techniques, mindfulness practices to get in the zone.
Get in the zone, yeah.
And these techniques can be incredibly powerful for WoW players as well. Creating a pre-game ritual, visualizing yourself, executing those perfect CC chains, or just taking a few deep breaths to calm your nerves. It can have a tangible impact on your performance.
So it's about getting yourself into that flow state where you're just completely present and focused.
Exactly. You want to be in the moment, not distracted by anything else.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in those high-pressure situations. Now, what about the physical side of things? How does exercise translate to better WoW skills?
You'd be surprised. Studies have shown that even short bursts of exercise can improve reaction time, focus, and decision-making, all of which are crucial skills in WoW arena.
So are you saying we should be hitting the gym before we hit the arena?
It's not about becoming a bodybuilder or anything, but incorporating some light exercise into your routine can definitely make a difference. Even a 15-minute cardio session or some stretching can help you feel more energized and focused.
Okay, so it's about taking care of your body.
Exactly. And we can't forget about ergonomics. Having a comfortable chair, proper posture, taking breaks to avoid repetitive strain injuries. These things are crucial for long-term performance.
So it's like treating your gaming setup like a professional athlete's training facility.
In a way, yeah. You want to create an environment that's conducive to optimal performance.
Now, let's get back to the mental game for a second. You mentioned reaction time. But how do you actually improve your decision-making skills? In the heat of battle, it seems like you either have it or you don't.
Well, that's where practice and deliberate repetition come in. The more you play, the more you'll start to recognize patterns and develop those instinctive reactions. It's about training your brain to process information quickly and make the right decisions under pressure.
So it's not just about clicking buttons as fast as you can.
No, it's about making the right choices in those split-second moments.
Yeah, okay. So how do you actually train that?
Well, reviewing your gameplay can be incredibly helpful. Watch recordings of your matches, analyze your choices, ask yourself, what could I have done differently in that situation? Did I use my cooldowns effectively? Was my positioning optimal?
It's like watching game film, but for YWs.
Oh, exactly.
Okay. And speaking of teamwork, how do you build that synergy and communication with your arena partner? Like that almost telepathic connection that you see in top-rated teams.
Well, that synergy comes from practice, communication, and a deep understanding of each other's playstyles. Doing mock arena matches where you're constantly communicating your intentions and calling out cooldowns, that can be incredibly helpful.
So it's like, I'm going to trap the healer in 3, 2, 1, go.
Exactly. Over time, you'll develop a shorthand communication style, using keywords and phrases to convey critical information quickly.
It's amazing how much of this translates directly to real-life teamwork and communication skills.
It really does, yeah. These are valuable skills to have both in and out of the game.
Okay, so let's be realistic. The WoW meta is constantly shifting, right? What happens when our trusty BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin comp falls out of favor?
Well, that's the beauty of this game. It's always evolving.
You gotta stay on your toes.
Exactly. But don't worry, the core principles of this comp, sustained pressure, smart defense, and precise coordination, those will always be relevant.
So it's about adapting those principles to the changing landscape of the game.
Precisely. You got to stay up to date on patch notes, watch high-rated streams, be willing to experiment.
So it's a continuous learning process.
It is, yeah. And that's what makes WoW so engaging.
It's always a challenge, a puzzle to solve.
Absolutely. And there are so many resources available to help you on your journey. Websites like SkillCapped, Twitch streams, Discord communities. It's like having a whole world of knowledge at your fingertips.
Yeah, the WoW community is amazing in that regard. But at the end of the day, it's about having fun, right?
Of course, yeah. That's what it's all about.
Enjoying the challenge, the camaraderie, the thrill of competition.
Exactly. If you're not having fun, what's the point?
Right, exactly. So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive so far, from talent builds and gear to advanced strategies and even training techniques. We've really explored what it takes to excel with BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface, but it's a good foundation.
It is. So what's the one key takeaway that you want listeners to walk away with today? What's the most important piece of advice you'd give to someone who's striving for that 2400 rating with this comp?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing is to never stop learning. The meta constantly shifts, new strategies emerge, and there's always room for improvement.
So it's about embracing that challenge, staying curious.
Exactly, and never give up on your goals.
Well said. Well said. It's been a fascinating deep dive into this dynamic duo. We've gone from the fundamentals to some pretty mind-blowing techniques.
It's been a lot of fun.
And to everyone listening, keep pushing, keep learning, and keep having fun in the arena. And if you hit 2400 with this comp, let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to hear about your victories.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more on the GM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin comp. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our exploration of the Beast Mastery Hunter and Lightsmith Holy Paladin comp in WoW Arena. And specifically, we're focusing on how to hit that coveted 2400 rating. Before the break, we talked about the foundations, talents, gear, the overall strategies. But now, let's dive into some of those finer details that can truly make a difference.
Yeah, those little things that separate the good players from the great ones.
Exactly. So first up, something that's been fascinating to me from the research you guys sent in. This concept of using Blessing of Sacrifice offensively. Explain that one to me.
Right. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? But think about it this way. You're in a tough spot. The enemy mage has you polymorphed. Your partner's getting focused.
And you're just sitting there, sheeped, unable to do anything.
Right. But if the paladin preemptively casts Blessing of Sacrifice on you...
Oh, I see. So the damage they do to you to break the polymorph actually gets transferred to the paladin.
Exactly. You essentially turn a defensive cooldown into an offensive tool and a CC break to boot. Of course, the timing has to be perfect.
All about prediction. Knowing when that polymorph is coming, man, that's high-level play.
It is, but it's something you can practice and get a feel for. And speaking of precision, another thing that separates the top players is their use of focus macros.
Focus macros. Refresh my memory on those.
They allow you to perform actions on specific targets without having to manually change your target.
So like interrupting a healer or trapping a specific target, all while you're still attacking your main target.
Exactly. It streamlines your gameplay and allows for much more precise execution.
I can see how that would be crucial, especially when things are getting chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. At 2400 rating, every global cooldown counts. You can't afford to waste time fumbling around with your targets. And speaking of being in sync...
Communication, right. We touched on that earlier.
Yeah, communication is absolutely paramount at this level. The top teams, they develop their own shorthand, almost a secret language.
Like healer low, trap incoming, 3, 2, 1, go.
Exactly. Keywords, quick phrases, they convey crucial information instantly. It's like they're operating on a whole other level.
It's mind-blowing, honestly. The level of coordination required to pull that off consistently.
It's impressive, for sure. But it's not magic. It's practice, dedication, and a deep understanding of each other's playstyles.
Makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's often overlooked, but equally important. The mental game.
Yes, the mental game. Often the difference between victory and defeat.
You're telling me. I've definitely had those moments where a loss just throws me off my game completely.
We've all been there. But the top players, they have this incredible ability to stay composed, even under immense pressure.
So how do they do it? Is it just something you're born with?
To some extent, maybe. But a lot of it comes down to developing mental resilience, learning to manage your emotions, to focus on the present moment, and to bounce back from setbacks.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure. It takes conscious effort. It's like training a muscle.
So what are some practical steps players can take to improve their mental game?
Well, first off, be mindful of your self-talk. Are you constantly putting yourself down, dwelling on mistakes?
Guilty as charged.
It's important to catch those negative thoughts and reframe them. Instead of, I messed up that trap, think, okay, what can I learn from that? How can I do better next time?
Turn those negatives into positive.
Exactly. And another thing that can help is developing pre-game routines and rituals.
Like those pro athletes we were talking about earlier.
Precisely. Something as simple as listening to your favorite music, doing some breathing exercises, or visualizing yourself succeeding can help you get into the right mindset.
It's about creating that mental space where you're focused, confident, and ready to perform at your best.
Exactly. And don't forget to take care of your physical well-being, too. Getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, staying hydrated, these things all contribute to a healthy mind and body.
It's all connected. I mean, I definitely notice a difference in my gameplay when I'm tired or haven't eaten properly.
We all do. Treating your body right is essential for optimal performance, both mentally and physically.
Okay, so we've got the mental game down. What about some more advanced in-game techniques? We were talking about focused macros before, but what else can players do to take their gameplay to the next level?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is mastering your pet control.
The hunter's furry companion.
Exactly. You know, at lower ratings, you might be able to get away with just letting your pet do its thing, but at 2400, you need to be much more proactive.
So what does that look like?
It's about utilizing the move to command effectively, positioning your pet strategically, and even exploiting its unique abilities. For example, a ferocity pet's bloodthirsty can provide a crucial burst of healing for your team.
So it's not just about the pet's damage output, it's about using it as a tactical tool.
Right. A well-controlled pet can be a game changer. And then there's the whole world of advanced cooldown management.
Okay, cooldown management. We've talked about not overlapping defensives, but what else is there to consider?
Well, it's about understanding the cooldowns of both your team and the enemy team. Knowing when to use your offensive cooldowns for maximum impact, when to hold them back, when to use your defensives preemptively.
It's like a constant mental calculation, weighing the risks and rewards of every decision.
It is. And it's not something you learn overnight. It takes practice, experience, and a deep understanding of the game's mechanics.
Speaking of mechanics, are there any specific ones that are particularly important for BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin to master?
Oh, definitely. For example, understanding trap timing and avoiding immunities is crucial. You don't want to waste a freezing trap on a target that's about to become immune to stuns.
Or worse, trap them right when their immunity wears off.
Exactly. And then for the hunter, mastering the art of front-loading frenzy stacks is a game changer. By generating those stacks early in the fight, you can set yourself up for some truly devastating burst damage later on.
So it's about playing the long game, planning ahead, and setting yourself up for success.
Right. It's not just about reacting to what's happening in the moment. It's about anticipating what's going to happen next and positioning yourself accordingly.
This is all incredibly valuable information, but I'm sure there's still so much more to learn. What resources would you recommend for players who want to dive even deeper into this comp?
Oh, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. Yeah. Websites like SkillCapped have fantastic in-depth guides specifically for BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin.
I've heard great things about SkillCapped.
Yeah, they're a great resource. And of course, there's always Twitch streams, YouTube videos, Discord communities.
The What Have You community is so vibrant and supportive.
It really is. There are so many people out there willing to share their knowledge and help others improve.
It's inspiring, honestly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier. The idea of adapting to the ever-changing meta.
Ah, yes, the meta. Always evolving, always keeping us on our toes.
So let's say BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin falls out of favor. What then?
Well, that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? The challenge of adapting, of finding new solutions, of pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So it's not about getting attached to one specific comp or strategy.
No, it's about understanding the underlying principles, the core mechanics that make a comp successful, and then applying those principles to whatever the current meta throws your way.
So it's a constant process of learning, experimenting, and evolving.
Exactly. And that's what makes WoW so endlessly fascinating.
I love that. It's not just a game, it's a journey of self-improvement.
Beautifully put. And that journey never truly ends. There's always something new to learn, something new to master.
It's a bit like life, isn't it? Okay, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover on BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin.
We've certainly given it our best shot.
Before we wrap up, I want to share a story that really highlights the importance of all these things we've been talking about. The skill, the strategy, the mental fortitude.
Oh, I love a good story. Lay it on me.
So there's this top-rated BM hunter, right? Goes by the name Malugans. absolute legend in the arena.
Malagans, yeah, I've heard of him. Insane player.
So Malagans is streaming one of his matches, and he's up against this really tough warrior healer comp.
Oof, that's a tough one.
And things are going well. You know, he's playing flawlessly, his positioning is perfect, his pet control is on point. But then he makes a mistake. A tiny one. But at that level, even the smallest error can be costly.
What happened?
He mistimed his trap. The warrior was just coming out of a stun, and Malagans thought he could catch him with a freezing trap. But
the warrior was immune.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? For a split second, you could see the frustration on Malagans' face. But then he just took a deep breath, refocused, and kept playing.
That's what separates the pros from the rest of us, that ability to shake off mistakes and keep your head in the game.
Right. And you know what? He ended up winning that match. Not easily, mind you, but he adapted, he adjusted his strategy, and he pulled off an incredible victory.
Amazing. It just goes to show, even the best players make mistakes. It's how you respond to those mistakes that truly matters.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's what we want you, our listeners, to take away from this deep dive. It's not about being perfect. It's about striving for excellence, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up on your goals.
Well said.
All right, that about wraps it up for our deep dive on Beast Mastery, Hunter Lightsmith Holy Paladin. We've covered a lot, from the fundamentals to some seriously high-level techniques. Hopefully, you've gained some valuable insights that you can apply to your own gameplay.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
And to everyone listening, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep pushing yourselves to be the best you can be. And who knows, maybe we'll see you on the ladder at 2400 someday.
We'll be watching.
Until next time, folks, keep those keyboards clicking and those wins coming. And we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into the Beast Mastery Hunter and Lightsmith Holy Paladin comp. Now, before we went to break, we were talking about how even the best players in the world make mistakes. But what sets them apart is their ability to adapt and keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. It's all about that mental resilience.
Right. And I think that's a great segue into something I wanted to touch on. You sent over some research on pro athlete training techniques and how they can be applied to WoW. I got to admit, at first, I was a little skeptical. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. These are people who dedicate their lives to mastering their craft, and there's got to be something we can learn from their approach.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. And a lot of it comes down to mindset.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Yeah.
How can we as WoW players learn from pro athletes when it comes to, say, mental preparation?
Well, one thing that athletes do really well is visualization. They spend time imagining themselves performing at their best, executing their moves flawlessly.
So like a basketball player visualizing themselves sinking that game-winning shot.
Exactly. And we can do the same thing in WoW. Before a match, take a few minutes to visualize yourself landing those crucial traps, perfectly timing your interrupts, making those clutch plays.
It's almost like creating a mental blueprint for success.
Right. And by repeatedly visualizing those successful outcomes, you're essentially training your brain to react in those situations.
Interesting. And what about things like pre-game routines and rituals? Do those actually make a difference?
Absolutely. Routines help to create a sense of familiarity and focus. They signal to your brain that it's time to get serious, to zone in and perform.
So like listening to a specific playlist or doing some stretches before you queue up?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, but having those consistent pre-game rituals can help to get you in the right mindset.
Makes sense. Now this might be a bit of a stretch, but what about the physical side of things? Can we actually improve our WoW skills through physical exercise?
You'd be surprised. Studies have shown that regular exercise can improve reaction time, focus, and cognitive function.
So it's not just about building muscles. It's about sharpening your mind as well.
Right, and don't forget about the importance of proper nutrition and hydration.
A fueling machine.
Exactly. Think of it like your body is a high-performance vehicle, and you need to give it the right fuel to perform at its best.
I like that analogy. Okay, so we've covered the mental and physical aspects of training like a pro athlete. What about the more technical aspects? Are there any specific skills or techniques that are particularly important for BM Hunter Lightsmith Paladin players to master?
Oh, absolutely. One thing that comes to mind is mastering the art of juking.
Juking, as in like faking out your opponent.
Exactly. It's about using your movement and abilities to mislead your opponents, to create openings, and to avoid their attacks.
Sounds like it takes a lot of practice.
It does. But it can be incredibly rewarding. A well-executed juke can completely turn the tide of a fight.
Okay, so we've got juking. What else?
Well, another key skill is learning to anticipate your opponent's moves.
So it's not just about reacting to what they're doing, it's about predicting what they're going to do next.
Right. It's about reading their intentions, understanding their cooldowns, and positioning yourself accordingly.
So it's like a mental chess match almost.
Exactly. And the more you play, the better you'll get at reading your opponents and anticipating their moves.
It's all about experience and observation.
Right. Pay attention to their habits, their patterns, their tells. The more information you can gather, the better equipped you'll be to outsmart them.
Makes sense. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to touch on something we haven't really talked about yet. Mana management.
Ah, yes, mana, the lifeblood of any caster.
And something that's often overlooked, especially in shorter matches.
Yeah.
But at the higher ratings, those matches can drag on and mana can become a real factor.
Absolutely. You don't want to be caught in a long game with an empty mana bar.
So any tips for managing mana effectively as a Lightsmith Holy Paladin?
Well, first off, be mindful of your Holy Shock usage. It's a powerful heal, but it can also be a mana drain if you're not careful.
So use it wisely.
Exactly. And try to weave in some Holy Light casts whenever possible. It's a more efficient heal in terms of mana per point of healing.
Makes sense. And what about the Hunter? Do they have any mana concerns?
Not as much as the Paladin, but it's still something to be aware of, especially if the match goes into dampening and you're constantly spamming Mend Pet.
Right. So it's always good to keep an eye on your mana bar no matter what class you're playing.
Absolutely. Mana awareness is a crucial skill for any arena player.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover on the Beast Mastery Hunter Lightsmith Holy Paladin comp. It's been an incredible journey exploring the depths of this dynamic duo.
It has been a pleasure sharing these insights with you.
And to everyone listening, we hope you've gained some valuable knowledge and inspiration that you can apply to your own gameplay.
Remember, the journey to 2400 is a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. It takes time, dedication, and a willingness to constantly learn and improve. But with the right mindset and the right approach, anything is possible. So keep pushing, keep striving, and never give up on your dreams.
We believe in.
And we'll be here to cheer you on every step of the way. Until next time, folks, happy hunting.